Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. Ya Zal Jalali wal Ikram, Ya Zal Jalali wal Ikram, Ya Zal Jalali wal Ikram. Amitna ala dinil Islam, Ya Zal Jalali wal Ikram, Ya Zal Jalali wal Ikram, Ya Zal Jalali wal Ikram. Amitna ala dinil Islam. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. Ya Zal Jalali wal Ikram, Ya Zal Jalali wal Ikram, Ya Zal Jalali wal Ikram. Amitna ala dinil Islam, Ya Zal Jalali wal Ikram, Ya Zal Jalali يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا ذا الجلال والإكرام أمتنا على دين الإسلام يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا ذا الجلال والإكرام أمتنا على دين الإسلام لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا ذا الجلال والإكرام أمتنا على دين الإسلام يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا ذا الجلال والإكرام أمتنا على دين الإسلام لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا ذا الجلال والإكرام أمتنا على دين الإسلام يا ذا الجلال والإكرام
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Selamat datang ke Majlis Syarahan Inaugural oleh Yang Berbahagia Prof. Dr. Latiffah Hassan. Di sini terdapat beberapa pengumuman penting yang perlu diberi perhatian sepanjang majlis berlangsung. Pengumuman pertama, semua tetamu diminta berada di tempat duduk dan tidak meninggalkan Dewan sebelum majlis selesai. Kedua, sila pastikan telefon bimbit para hadirin dimatikan atau berkeadaan di dalam mood senyap sepanjang majlis ini berlangsung. Terakhir, para hadirin diminta berdiri semasa pengumuman ketibaan masuk tetamu kehormat. Kerjasama hadirin amat diharapkan. Sekian, terima kasih.
Mengumumkan ketibaan Yang Berbahagia Profesor Dr. Ismi Arif bin Ismail, Timbalan Naib Chancellor Akademik dan Antarabangsa, Universiti Putra Malaysia, diiringi div-div kehormat masuk ke Dewan.
Para hadirin dengan segala hormatnya dimohon berdiri bagi bersama-sama menyanyikan lagu Negaraku dan Putra Gemilang.
bina wawasan gemilang. Universiti Putra Malaysia membentuk siswa cemerlang. Semarak namamu di sinar zaman, semerbak namamu di suara sanjungan. Penyumbang bakti ke anak bangsa, pewaris sejati negara tercinta. Damai insani perbaik kota, tersemat citramu semoga berhangat. Di darjat bangsa, di daulat negara, tersurat jasamu rencana kemajuan.
Para hadirin dipersilakan duduk. Melayang serindit di atas permatang, merbah berkicau di hujung muara. Pemanis kata selamat datang, awal bismillah pembuka bicara.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera dan salam Malaysia Madani. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Ismi Arif bin Ismail, Timbalan Naib Chancellor Akademik dan Antarabangsa, Universiti Putra Malaysia, mewakili Naib Chancellor Universiti Putra Malaysia. Yang berbahagia Datuk Profesor Dr. Muhammad Azmi Muhammad Lila, Dekan Fakulti Perubatan Veterinar Universiti Putra Malaysia. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan yang akan menyampaikan syarahan inaugural pada pagi ini. Timbalan-timbalan Dekan Fakulti Perubatan Veterinar, Ketua-Ketua Jabatan Fakulti Perubatan Veterinar, Pegawai-pegawai Universiti, Datuk-datuk dan datin-datin, Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, mahasiswa-mahasiswi, hadirin sekalian.
Selamat datang ke Majlis Syarahan Inaugural oleh Yang Berbahagia Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan. Bagi memohon berkat majlis pada hari ini, majlis menjemput saudara Muhammad Adam Firdaus untuk memimpin bacaan doa. Majlis mempersilakan.
Bismillah. Kita mulakan majlis kita pada hari ini dan permulaan doa kita dengan Al-Fatihah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Hamdan yuwafi ni'mahu yukafi'u mazidah. Ya Rabbana lakal hamdu kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhika wa 'azimi sultanik. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad salatan tunjina biha min jami'il ahwali wal afat wa taqdi lana biha min jami'il hajat wa tutahhirana biha min jami'is sayyi'at wa tarfa'una biha 'indaka a'la darajat wa tuballighna biha aqsal ghayat min jami'il khairat fil hayati wa ba'da al mamat wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. اللهم افتح لنا في هذا المجلس أبواب الخير وأبواب السلامة وأبواب الصحة وأبواب النعمة وأبواب البركة وأبواب القوة وأبواب المودة وأبواب الرحمة وأبواب الرزق وأبواب العلم وأبواب المغفرة وأبواب الجنة يا أرحم الراحمين. Ya Allah, bukakanlah untuk kami di majlis ini pintu-pintu kebaikan, pintu-pintu keselamatan, pintu-pintu kesihatan, pintu-pintu nikmat, pintu-pintu keberkatan, pintu-pintu kekuatan, pintu-pintu cinta sejati, pintu-pintu kasih sayang, pintu-pintu rezeki, pintu-pintu ilmu, pintu-pintu keampunan ya arhamar rahimin. اللهم بارك لنا في هذا المجلس، اللهم بارك لنا في هذا المجلس، اللهم بارك لنا في هذا المجلس. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا في المجالس فافسحوا يفسح الله لكم وإذا قيل انشزوا فانشزوا يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات والله بما تعملون خبير. Hai orang-orang beriman, apabila dikatakan kepadamu, berlapang-lapanglah di dalam majlis, maka lapangkanlah. Niscaya Allah akan memberi kelapangan untukmu. Dan apabila dikatakan, berdirilah kamu, maka berdirilah. Niscaya Allah akan meninggikan orang-orang yang beriman di antaramu dan orang-orang yang diberi ilmu pengetahuan beberapa derajat. Dan Allah Maha mengetahui apa yang kamu kerjakan. Surah Al-Mujadalah ayat 11. Sadaqallahul Azim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Sadaqallahul Azim. Majlis mengucapkan terima kasih di atas pimpinan bacaan doa itu tadi. Untuk makluman, saudara Muhammad Adam Firdaus adalah putera kepada Yang Berbahagia Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan. Sama-sama kita doakan semoga Adam menjadi insan yang berjaya suatu hari nanti seperti ayah dan ibunya. Amin.
Para hadirin, seterusnya majlis dengan sukacitanya menjemput dan mempersilakan Yang Berbahagia Profesor Dr. Ismi Arif bin Ismail, Timbalan Naib Chancellor Akademik dan Antarabangsa untuk mempengerusikan Majlis Syarahan Inaugural ini dan seterusnya menjemput Yang Berbahagia Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan untuk menyampaikan syarahan beliau yang bertajuk One for All and All for One, Health at the Animal-Human Environment Interface. Majlis dengan segala hormatnya mempersilakan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Terima kasih saudara dan saudari pengacara majlis. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Salam Malaysia Madani. Yang berbahagia Datuk Profesor Dr. Muhammad Azmi Muhammad Lila, Dekan Fakulti Perubatan Veterinar. Yang berbahagia Profesor Academician Datin Paduka Setia, Datuk Dr. Aini Idris, Pro Chancellor International Medical University, mantan Naib Chancellor UPM. Thank you for coming. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan yang akan menyampaikan syarahan inaugural pada pagi ini. Dekan-dekan pengarah-pengarah pegawai kanan universiti, pengurusan Fakulti Perubatan Veterinar, warga Fakulti Perubatan Veterinar, ahli keluarga Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan. Terima kasih pada ananda Adam. Tahniah pada ayahanda dan ayahanda Prof Latiffah dan juga Profesor Dr. Abdul Latif atas majlis yang istimewa pada pagi ini. Saya lihat ada mantan-mantan dekan dan juga Prof Zunita pada mantan pengarah IBS. Semua ni adalah individu-individu yang penting lah yang membangunkan fakulti, so we have to honor their presence today. So, seterusnya para temu jemputan dan hadirin yang dihormati sekalian, pertama sekali alhamdulillah segala puji bagi Allah Tuhan sekalian alam. Selawat dan salam ke atas junjungan besar Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ahli keluarga serta para sahabat baginda. Syukur pada Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala kerana dengan izin dan rahmatnya maka dapat kita berkumpul pada pagi Jumaat yang barakah ini bagi meneruskan usaha memartabatkan kesarjanaan ilmu. Terlebih dahulu saya dengan rendah diri ingin menyampaikan salam daripada Yang Berbahagia Datuk Profesor Dr. Muhammad Roslan Sulaiman, Naib Chancellor UPM yang tidak dapat bersama kita pada pagi ini disebabkan urusan rasmi lain yang tidak dapat dielakkan. Namun saya mengambil tanggungjawab ini dan sangat berbesar hati untuk memperkenalkan Yang Berbahagia Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan pada Majlis Syarahan Inaugural beliau ini Bukan sahaja sebagai wakil Naib Chancellor, tetapi juga sebagai family friend. Okay. So, tahniah diucapkan kepada Yang Berbahagia Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan atas kejayaan dan pencapaian beliau selama memikul tanggungjawab dan amanah sebagai pendidik. Tahniah juga diucapkan kepada ibu bapa, seluruh ahli keluarga dan para sahabat, guru-guru beliau, kerana tentunya kejayaan di tahap ini adalah hasil dorongan, doa, motivasi, inspirasi dan nasihat daripada mereka semua. Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan merupakan seorang pakar epidemiologi kesihatan awam veterinar. Sebagai seorang epidemiologis, beliau sangat berminat dengan data dan terdapat kisah yang tersirat di sebaliknya. Beliau merupakan salah seorang dari hanya beberapa ahli epidemiologi veterinar di Malaysia. Sekembalinya beliau dari pengajian di University Cornell, New York, USA, beliau pantas mendapati bahawa terdapat banyak kekurangan dari segi kajian dan penerbitan berkaitan epidemiologi penyakit haiwan yang penting dari segi ekonomi dan kesihatan awam. Oleh itu, karya dan penerbitan awal beliau banyak menumpukan kepada penerangan asas penyakit berdasarkan pengawasan, sistem kawalan penyakit dan penilaian program dengan objektif utama untuk menghasilkan maklumat yang relevan yang boleh digunakan oleh penggubal dasar. Sejak itu, penyelidikan beliau terus berkembang luas dan dalam masa yang sama konsisten memfokuskan kepada bidang pencegahan dan mitigasi penyakit untuk mencipta dan mengukuhkan dasar mengenai patogen bawaan makanan dan zoonosis yang muncul dari masa ke semasa. Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan telah berkhidmat hampir sedekad sebagai Ketua Jabatan dan Pengurusi Perkhidmatan Makmal Veterinar, sebuah makmal diagnostik yang menjana pendapatan melalui perkhidmatan yang diakreditasi. Beliau juga adalah Ketua Penyelidik untuk 21 projek penyelidikan dan projek bukan penyelidikan di peringkat kebangsaan dan antarabangsa. Selain itu, beliau juga merupakan koordinator Malaysia One Health University Network, MyOHUN, semenjak 2012 hingga kini dan merupakan Ketua Penyelidik untuk One Health Workforce Next Generation for Malaysia semenjak 2015. Untuk makluman semua, nilai dana yang terkumpul untuk projek di bawah tanggungjawab beliau dianggarkan melebihi RM21 juta. Dan ini tidak termasuk sumbangan dalam bentuk in-kind daripada rakan kongsi dan agensi luar. Dalam penerbitan, beliau telah mengarang dan menjadi pengarang bersama untuk lebih daripada 80 kertas kerja dalam jurnal terkemuka dalam bidangnya dan juga telah menerbitkan beberapa bab dalam buku, protokol penyakit dan manual. Prof. Latiffah sangat komited dan aktif dalam membantu agensi kerajaan dengan menganggotai beberapa jawatan kuasa di dalam kementerian dan agensi serta merupakan penasihat teknikal untuk beberapa projek di Jabatan Perkhidmatan Veterinar, Institut Kesihatan Negara dan Kementerian Kesihatan Malaysia. Beliau juga sering berucap sebagai penceramah utama atau pleno di mesyuarat, persidangan kebangsaan dan antarabangsa serta berpeluang untuk memoderasikan mesyuarat badan induk antarabangsa seperti Kesatuan Eropah dan sebagai panel dalam forum badan antarakerajaan seperti FAO dan OIE. Selain itu, Profesor Dr. Latiffah juga merupakan sebahagian daripada anggota pakar FAOs dan UNEP untuk One Health, Wildlife and Livelihood. Antara pelibatan beliau adalah sebagai ahli dalam steering committee untuk projek INGSA NESM, Countering Zoonotic Spillover of High Consequence Pathogens, pakar teknikal untuk One Health Core Competencies dan juga salah seorang ahli lembaga eksekutif dalam Malaysia and Southeast Asia One Health University Network dan International Board of One Health Examiners for One Health. Beliau juga merupakan editor bersekutu untuk PLOS 1, Frontiers Veterinary Science, Jurnal Vet Malaysia dan penasihat untuk Journal of Veterinary Science. Beliau turut menjadi penasihat geran untuk the Hong Kong Jockey Club Research Foundation, International Foundation of Science Sweden dan penilai untuk rangkaian serantau Greece. Ini Greece macam tajuk movie lah. Greece yang menyokong aktiviti penyelidikan untuk pengurusan yang lebih baik bagi kemunculan wabak berisiko di Asia Tenggara pada tahun 2022. Baru-baru ini beliau telah dijemput untuk menjadi salah seorang daripada 3 pengerusi bersama untuk Lancet Harvard, I hope I pronounce it correctly, Global Health Institute Preventing Pandemics at the SARS Coalition Commission on Preventing Viral Spillover, di mana beliau berpeluang untuk membentuk rundingan antarabangsa utama yang sekarang ini sedang dilaksanakan. Pada usia sekarang, beliau terus cergas dan aktif dalam meneruskan sumbangan beliau melalui bidang kepakaran dalam pelbagai aktiviti dan sumbangan terutamanya dalam pengajaran dan pembelajaran, penyelidikan, khidmat profesional dan sebagainya. So memang layaklah Profesor Latiffah untuk kita persembahkan kepada semua hadirat pada pagi ini. Jadi saya lihat Prof Latiffah pun dah tak sabar-sabar untuk naik ke pentas. Jadi tanpa melengahkan masa, saya dengan ini menjemput yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan untuk menyampaikan syarahan beliau yang bertajuk One for All and All for One, Health at the Animal-Human Environment Interface. Dengan segala hormatnya, dipersilakan.
When things go wrong, they will go wrong, right? Okay. Terima kasih kepada pengurusi majlis Dr. Anas dan juga Dr. Azalia, pengurusi majlis hari ini, yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Ismi Arif bin Ismail, Timbalan Naib Chancellor Universiti Putra Malaysia, Profesor Datuk Dr. Muhammad Azmi Lela, Dekan Fakulti Perubatan Malaysia, Perubatan Veterinar, barisan pengurusan Fakulti Perubatan Veterinar, professors, Abah di belakang, Long, my family over here right at the front, dan para jemputan, hadirin hadirat sekalian, terima kasih banyak diucapkan kerana sorry ya, technical. Izinkan saya meneruskan majlis dalam bahasa Inggeris. Saya ucapkan terima kasih lagi sekali dan juga saya mohon maaf kepada ada masalah teknikal sikit tadi. Thank you for being here with me today. It is absolutely an honor and very humbling to be standing in front of everyone, including all those who are tuning in virtually. I'm not sure how many of you. I think my mother-in-law and family in the US are tuning in, hopefully. Thank you, and I want to take a moment to thank all of you who directly or indirectly have contributed to all the good that came out of me. So whatever that is not good, whatever that is poor, that's absolutely my own. So I'm dedicating my talk today and my presence to my late mother, my ma, the ultimate multitasker, to my father, the strongest man I know, to my husband and my children, my family. I am dedicating my presence today to all of you. It is an absolute privilege to be your child, Abah, and to be your sister, and to be your mak saudara. Okay, for today, I'm not going to be going into too much about, too much scientific facts and information. I'm here to tell a few stories. Simple. When I was young, I wanted to be many things, right? A lot of it are TV characters. So as far back as I could remember, there were the three of us, myself, my older sister Long, and my younger sister Sue. The three of us, we love this one show called Little House on the Prairie. So my mother is a multitasker, so she will teach us almost every night Quran. But one night a week, she will allow us to watch this show along with the family members. So we followed Laura Ingalls' journey as she grew up to become a school teacher. She married Almanzo. And I wanted to be somebody like her, living in that kind of environment. So that's supposed to be my sister, who's Melissa Gilbert. And in the middle is my younger sister, Sue, and that's me. I'm Laura Ingalls. At some point of time, I thought, hey, it could be interesting to become one of the angels in Charlie's Angel. So we came from a very, very humble beginning. Both my parents were orphaned when they were very young. Life was very hard for them, but that hardship actually gave them wisdom beyond what anybody can teach them. And they value education the most, more than anything else. And as adults, all 7 of their children are graduates from universities. At some point during raising us, my father had to take up 3 separate jobs. He was a fireman, and he was a farmer, and at night he would sell kueh, by which my mother and later my sister made, and sometimes he would also sell burger to the many tourists in Cameron Highlands. So I remember that my father and mother would manually open unoccupied land in Cameron Highlands to grow cabbage and vegetables, by which we later sell for money. I love to read. This is what I do. And at 5, I begged my father to send me to school. I still remember standing by the door as my father approached the school teacher in Standard 1 and asked if I can sit in the class. At that time, there was no tadika or kindergarten. It's not something that children go to, I guess. But the teacher did not allow me to go. So my father invested on what could have been like 5 or 6 months of his salary to buy this set of encyclopedia. So it's considered a luxury item then. I'm not being paid to advertise for this Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica, mind you. But I'm just saying that the investment that my father did for the children, it's amazing. So there were 48 volumes, and by the time I was 12, I read every single one of these. So we don't get to go places just because we don't have a whole lot of money, but the books, this encyclopedia, took me to places and really shape my worldviews in terms of what I can be and what I want to grow up to be. So I was picked to attend a boarding school called Samsas in Kuantan. It is one of the first fully funded boarding school in Pahang. And from there, I decided that I love medicine. And I applied to a few medical schools, including veterinary medicine in UPM. For whatever reason, by the grace of Allah or maybe rezeki, I did not fill up specific forms for medical school, which was required at the time. So I ended up having to go to UPM. I ended up taking diploma in animal science. I was promoted to DVM on the second year into the program. And on the third year of the program, I was asked by the head of department at the time, Prof. Rasidi, who was, if I am interested to pursue my education in public health. I was also asked by another head of department if I'm interested in surgery, but I was like, eh. But I have always loved the idea of broad-based knowledge and connecting between animal and human health, so I decided that I would take up the offer to do public health. I was in class with a fun bunch of classmates, and we graduated in 1995. So once I graduated, by chance, I met Prof. Husni, who was visiting the late arwah Dr. Nazri. At that time, I was already accepted to enroll in Johns Hopkins Medical School for MPH and PhD program, but I was really intimidated because I've never been anywhere but Malaysia. I've never even flew on a plane. So to go to Baltimore with the stories that I heard was very intimidating. I did not think that I would even qualify to go to Cornell because Cornell is an Ivy League, so I didn't even apply. So Prof. Husni persuaded me to apply, and a few weeks later, I was accepted for enrollment in fall of 2016. So Cornell is like, the vet school is like a different world. It looks like it's about ready to be launched into space. And it's absolutely gorgeous. Full of very, very smart people, extremely challenging environment, quite intimidating, and it gets to be really, really, really cold in winter. So Ivy Leagues are known for their urban legend. So with Cornell, it's the great pumpkin prank story. I don't know whether Prof. Aro was there when this happened. I don't think you were. But there was this really tall building called the McGraw Tower. It's really, really tall. So one fine morning, I was walking down the road, and then I saw this gigantic pumpkin. It was placed on top of the, it was like staked on top of the tower. So nobody knew like who put it there. There was no way that anybody could climb up that high. And there was no way also a helicopter possibly could have like placed it there. So it was till this very day a big mystery. So Cornell being Cornell, they saved everything. So they even saved the dried version of the pumpkin. And Cornell being Cornell, like such a nerdy place, they actually did genetic analysis on the pumpkin. And sure enough, it was pumpkin. So the pumpkin received the certificate that it is absolutely a pumpkin. So one of the things that we got to do as graduate students is to present our work, right? So while I was in Cornell, I managed to travel to many parts of the United States and Europe to present my work. In 1998, I was presenting my work in San Diego, and I noticed, this is like right before my presentation, I was looking at the TV and I said, that looks like Malaysia. But what appeared to be an audio or like a video of like pigs really being sick, and then also the news person saying that a lot of people died from being in contact with the pigs. So actually that was the first outbreak of the novel Nipah virus. I later learned that bats had something to do with the zoonotic infection, and that the novel Nipah virus from the paramyxil family was the causative agent. The infection devastated the pig industry absolutely. all of you know this story. Of course, many of you were actually here while I was away, and many of our farmers died, and we lost a few $100 million US. About 120 farmers actually died. About 1 million pigs were culled, and absolutely ruined the town economy as locals migrated from affected areas out. It destroyed the town real estate, and the cascade of damage, like financial damage that was done because of Nipah was absolutely tremendous. Many farmers left the farming activity. They go into a different type of livestock, or they go into a non-livestock agricultural businesses. Nipah outbreak instigated significant cross-collaborative and transdisciplinary investigation to comprehensively explain how and why the virus emerged from the wilderness. So I was quoted by the South China Morning Post saying that Nipah was a turning point, that people recognize as the interconnection between what's happening in the ecosystem, land use change, agriculture intensification, and climate changes at the time, and how those all occurred at the same time, and what arises from that is something that is extremely explosive. Fast forward to 2020. So Nipah, the changes that Nipah has brought about to the research ecology, it kind of like sets the momentum for other researchers to embrace similar more holistic approach in studies that aim to explore other emerging disease threats. More importantly, Nipah signals that one cannot hope to prevent or manage emerging diseases by working in silo. So I was approaching my 4th year in Cornell with all the craziness and writing my thesis, analyzing data, finishing my work, my laboratory work. Being a multitasker that I was, I thought, why not add something else for me to do? Why not get married? So what I did was that I snatched one of the white person that I saw, have him marry me, and bound him for Malaysia. So when I returned to Malaysia, I actually have not one, but 2 important certificates. With ranking of importance, notice which one is missing right here. Now that I return home, I have to invite myself on what I want to be. To many of us who have PhD is just a driving license. You know, you can do with it and you can drive it to wherever you want to go. But it is up to you to decide where you want to go. And if you should decide that you want to change your destination, you need to reroute, re-navigate, everything until you arrive to that destination. So when I return, the ecosystem for epidemiological type of research is not that highly conducive. Most proposals and grant proposals require some type of like invention or patents. A lot of money are being invested to making diagnostic kits or making vaccine. So as a young epidemiologist, I was slightly lost. And I have to be creative on what I can do. At this early point of my career, I was very fortunate and privileged to be roped to assist the disease control, epidemiology, and zoonosis section at the Department of Veterinary Services to assist in writing a few protocols, to do some workshops on how to analyze data, and also on how to deal with some of the surveillance data. Sometimes they also call me to contribute to outbreak situation. At the same time, I was also very fortunate. At that time, there was no these requirements of you have to wait until a certain number of years before you can have PhD. Almost immediately, I have my PhD student. My first student was Dr. Lat, and I was also invited to supervise a PhD work by DVS Veterinarian Dr. Suhayati. So Nipah was a hot item then. It was early 2000. There were a lot of interest to work more on Nipah to understand how the disease arose, to understand what brought the disease to Malaysia. So this study was the first study to comprehensively investigate the local bats, local therapist bats, which were found at the index farm following the Nipah outbreak. The aim of the study was to describe the Nipah virus transmission, dynamic, serological, and excretion pattern. From the study, we learned that about 11% of Therapus hypomelanus, that's island bats, and 33% of Therapus vampirus, that's flying foxes, carried the neutralizing antibodies against Nipah throughout Peninsular Malaysia. We actually understood better about the transmission dynamics of the virus, where we found that bats with wider coverage, meaning they can fly to a wider range of areas, like Therapus vampirus, for example, they are much more likely to become infected than bats that have less coverage, such as P. hypomelanus, which is they're island bats, so they tend to restrict themselves or bound themselves to the surroundings of the island. Our findings also informed more substantially about the bat's immunoresponse to Nipah, including viral recrudescent event, which till then was only hypothesized or speculated. Our study proves that infected bats could maintain the virus while serologically tested negative. Notice here that they were tested negative. Initially, they were positive, then they tested negative. As we followed the bats and the bat became pregnant, the bat actually released or the virus recrudesced from the bat. So our longitudinal data shows increasing antibody titer as the female bat transitioned to pregnancy. Some of them increase their antibody titer when they became, when they're lactating. So whenever there is additional stress, these bats have that ability to shed the virus. We also found that because they are reservoir, even though the antibody titer increases to 4 times, they remain asymptomatic. Apart from bats in Malaysia, therapeutic bats were also trapped around Southeast Asia countries such as Cambodia, Indonesia, and Thailand. And they demonstrated serological evidence as well, a finding that is not surprising given the distance travel and the fact that these are migratory bats. What is baffling is that despite the wide distribution of Nipah virus, no other outbreaks have since been seen in Southeast Asia. I mean, India and Bangladesh do get the Nipah outbreak still, but we have not had any outbreaks since the one in Malaysia. There are numerous studies that have since explored bat's fascinating ability and dynamic immunogenicity to host multiple disease agents while remaining asymptomatic. In fact, thousands of new bat-associated viral species have been recorded, most with no known disease potential, while others such as rabies, Ebola, Marburg, and Hendra have infected humans and other mammals worldwide. In other parts of the world, in Africa especially, wildlife-driven zoonosis outbreaks such as Ebola, Lassa, Marburg, and West Nile disease occur at an increasing frequencies between 1990 and 2010, which raises the flag that something ecologically driven but not yet fully understood was happening around the globe. Along the timeline of which Nipah breakout occurred in Malaysia, another zoonotic virus makes its presence known in Hong Kong. It was 1997. The highly pathogenic avian influenza HPAI H5N1 was detected amongst poultry, which was later reported to infect and causes death among humans in close contact. The infection later re-emerged in China and spread to the Southeast Asia countries in 2003 via poultry movement and migratory birds. The direct cumulative losses to the poultry sectors in Southeast Asia between 2003 and 2005 was up to USD 10 billion as a result of massive culling of affected and at-risk flocks. As a country, Malaysia was spared from the worst because of the diligence of our veterinary authority, in addition to tremendous luck. Between 2004 and 2006, only 2 sporadic H5N1 outbreaks occurred, but were rapidly controlled by the veterinary authority. These 2 outbreaks, however, were enough to make a significant economic impact. For example, Malaysia exporter suffered a total loss of 2 million ringgit a day due to Singapore trade ban, a 20% drop in local consumer demand for chicken, and the resulting drop in average chicken prices. Okay, what Malaysia suffered through was actually pale in comparison to what the neighboring countries had to endure. The widespread outbreaks in poultry and spillover cases to humans in Vietnam and then in Indonesia, for example, resulted in the 2 countries to embark on mass vaccination of chickens. On top of the direct and indirect losses due to culling of the chicken and loss because of death of the chicken, they have to invest in vaccine, cold chain assurance of the vaccine, and training of vaccinators and mass communication campaign. The countries paid a hefty USD 22 million for the cost of delivering vaccine during the first year, only during the first year of the vaccine. I mean, not talking about second year and third year. The first year itself is already 22 million USD. Throughout the years when HPI, H5N1 traveled the region, I became socially aware of the increasing dialogues about the next pandemic and the conversation on the what-if situation. I love the what-if situation. So, for example, what if H5N1 virus mutates and gain ability not only from birds to human, but also from human to human? What if the virus infects pigs, which is a known amplifier host of influenza virus? Will new or reassorted virus be generated? And will that virus be transmissible to human and from human to human? All these questions and discussion created lots of theories, lots of hypotheses, and lots of fear. Fear that HPAI H5N1 will morph into something more ominous to cause another Spanish flu pandemic. Now, ironically, while all this discussion and dialogues were happening, gaining momentum, a different virus surfaced in 2002 to cause a mini pandemic. Between 2002 and late 2003, severe acute respiratory syndrome SARS coronavirus infected over 8,000 people from more than 20 countries and resulted in over 700 deaths. That's nothing compared to COVID-19, but it was something at the time. This was brought from Hong Kong in February 2003, and it later spread to other Asian countries. At the end of the epidemic, which lasted only about 6 months, the global cumulative total was about 8,400 cases with 900 deaths. Epidemiological investigation revealed that the novel virus originated from live animal market in China and specifically was linked to a wild animal called palm civet. The epidemic lasted only 6 months, but enough to cost the world an estimated $40 billion. How many zeros is that? So on the background, as this is happening, HPNI, H5N1 continue to storm the Southeast Asian region and the rest of the globe between 2004 and 2007. So the conversation about the next influenza pandemic, which is still happening to this very day, but at that time focusing pigs as the perfect mixing vessel for various reassortments of influenza A virus from birds and from humans intensified. Pigs have a very special ecology of influenza A viruses, allowing them to become infected with influenza A from multiple sources, such as from birds and from humans. At the time, we have no knowledge whether our pigs, whether they have any circulating influenza A virus, because influenza A or swine flu, classical swine flu, is very important for temperate countries. But in Malaysia, it is not considered as something that is of clinical importance. According to Malaysian swine veterinarians, swine flu is not considered a menace in Malaysian pig industry because of numerous factors, including tropical weather that lessens virus potency. Nonetheless, because we are researchers, unless we know what is in our backyard and unless we know who our enemies are, we might be caught unprepared when it strikes. So as part of a larger influenza A research program, my team and I decided to conduct a very simple cross-sectional study in our local pigs to search for evidence of influenza A virus, subtype H1N1 and H3N2, known to cause classical swine flu. Sorry. From that study, we did not manage to isolate the virus, but we found about 40% of pig farms we sampled have at least one pig tested seropositive for the classical swine flu as a result of either H1N1 or H3N2 subtypes. A moderate percentage, about 12% of our local pigs were positive for either H1N1 or H3N2. But the clinical infection is not serious enough to warrant attention from the pig farming community. So no vaccination for our local pigs, and no legal vaccine were allowed to be imported into the country. So another thing that we found, the risk factors we found amongst the farm that were positive was that they have been importing breeding pigs from European countries, and Europe is known to be endemic for swine flu. In addition, we observed that other mammalian species or pets, such as cats or dogs, if they are around the farms, it increases the likelihood of pigs being infected. In 2009, the world indeed was confronted with what was initially thought to be novel swine flu, influenza A, triggering a new level of fear and apprehension about pigs as the amplifier for novel pandemic influenza viruses and for other emerging pathogens. The reassorted influenza virus, later named the pandemic influenza A H1N1 2009, emerged between March and April 2009 in the US among individuals with a travel history to Mexico. So in a really hyper-connected globe where an individual can travel from one country to another within a few hours, the virus spreads rapidly. In especially the northern hemisphere, and within the first few months transmit across the globe via human-to-human transmission, causing the first global influenza pandemic of the century. However, funnily, throughout the outbreak period, there was no evidence that the new H1N1 infection was transmitted to pigs, except for possible human-to-pig transmission of the virus on a Canadian pig farm. As the outbreak progressed, it became very clear that pigs play no active role in the pandemic and the epidemiology of the disease. So the virus is actually a combination of avian, human, swine, triplet resortant. It's a resortant virus, and the swine part has been there for a long time before the pandemic actually occurred. But the genetic component of the virus resulted in the use of media-friendly swine flu. It's easy to say swine flu rather than that whole mouthful of thing, right? So they call it swine flu. Even WHO also call it swine flu. So what that does, it led to a serious misunderstanding and a downturn in regional pork market around the world. Various groups in the region advocate the eradication of all pigs. Even though the pigs are not sick, there's no evidence to say that they are spreading the disease. Some groups say that we should get rid of all pigs. So to reduce the risk of disease, even though no evidence of infection of the virus was observed in pigs. In such countries, sometimes pigs were mass slaughtered for fear of spreading the virus. And we heard stories, like really horrifying stories, about pigs being burned alive or being buried alive to make sure that they do not spread the disease. And sadly, this practice has continued to this very day in some countries to contain certain transboundary diseases such as FMD and African swine fever. So while all this is happening, I attended an emergency meeting at the Ministry on the pandemic influenza A H1N1. At the meeting, there were some talks about human vaccine, which at the time it was undergoing trial, and there were also lots of questions about vaccine availability for pigs. However, no vaccine was available. Nobody was trying to make vaccine for the pigs at the time. Unfortunately, while fear and apprehension were at its height, a large pharmaceutical company crafted a pseudo-scientific excuse to introduce the classical swine flu vaccine to our local pigs. The vaccine is not approved and has never been used in Malaysia. In the wake of Nipah experience, the farmers were still reeling from the experience. They were very hypersensitive about their livelihood, their business. So they were informed by the pharmaceutical company that they need to vaccinate their pigs, and they have to bear the cost. And it could be a large amount of cost given the size of their herd. For a reason that I don't really understand till this very day, the Farmers Association decided to invite me for their meeting to ask me questions. I did as much research, desk research as I could prior to meeting them so that I can give them the right information. At that meeting, I told them basically just the facts, there is no evidence to suggest all these alternative facts or fake news nowadays that the vaccine will also supposedly confer protection and will stop transmission back to humans. There is no evidence at all to support those claims. So the farmers, after the meeting, they came out with the minute of the meeting, and they distributed it to a large audience. Needless to say, once the minute reached the private company, I received an irate series of emails asking if I am the cited expert from UPM. So the specialists from the company presented imaginary evidence, pseudological factoids, and convoluted arguments supporting the vaccine. At a point of desperation, manipulated the work that we published, me and Surya, and Prof. Aini also was in the team, So manipulated the work I published on classical swine flu in 2007 to support the necessity of the vaccine. After a few weeks of going back and forth, many emails, it seems clear that the motivation of those emails was to compel me to inform the farmers that I now changed my mind, you actually need to vaccinate the pigs. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I was really naive, so I did not give in. So I must have cost the company a few million ringgit. They were very angry. So I was like really looking every day at my tires to make sure nobody's slashing it. In retrospect, I must say that it's one of the most gratifying moments as a young epidemiologist and one of the proudest achievements in my career, standing up against the big pharma that attempted to use twisted science to favor their pockets while undermining the farmers' economy. Post-pandemic surveillance in pigs in Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam showed that retransmission, human to pig, of virus infection occurred. It does occur at about 20% in tested pigs, but there was no evidence that it is transmitted back to human, unlike SARS-CoV-2 that is currently known to spill back from mammals to humans, and from human to mammals. This did not happen with H1N1 2009 virus. Okay, I'm going to move into bacterial zoonosis. And I love this quote. We have to understand that we humans and animals start out with a disadvantage. As a species, we reproduce an average about of every 25 years. Right? You give birth maybe when you're 25 or so. Microbes on the other hand, can reproduce every 25 minutes. By your standards, they are hyper-evolutionary. So as you can see in this war, ours is not the dominant or strategic form of renewal. So a term that surfaced during the increasing attention of zoonosis was the dual-use biological agents. Pathogens that exist naturally, but can be used or manipulated for the purpose of harm. A few categories of this agent, including number of zoonotic viruses and bacteria, have been listed. So I wanted to present to you two agents, bacterial agents, that are in that list, which is Brucella species and Burkholderia pseudomallei. In 2010, there was a large outbreak of brucellosis outbreak among 80 people. It was linked to increasingly popular practice of consuming raw goat's milk. So anybody who loves to consume raw goat's milk, think again. So I was present during the interministerial meeting to discuss the brucellosis outbreak. The meeting also brought to light the increasing brucellosis cases among livestock farmers and then accidental or sporadic lab-acquired infection in technical personnel. It was very fortuitous because two of my PhD students were actually working on the national surveillance data and were conducting case control studies of brucellosis in cattle and small ruminants in Malaysia. So brucellosis has lingered in Malaysian livestock for many years at really low level, but incidence progressively surged, as you can see, from 2004. Even though it remained to be low, it did show some kind of surging right there in live cattle and goats, because we at that time were importing quite a number from endemic countries starting the late 1990s. We also saw that there was a significant difference in the density of cases among states in Peninsula, with higher concentration states that have large integrated farms. It's very difficult to stamp out. This is not just a problem for Malaysia, but the most developed countries also have problem with brucellosis. It's very extremely difficult to stamp out. From the nationwide surveillance data, we found that serological evidence for bovine brucellosis is less than 3% in animal level, but relatively high at herd level. while for Brucella melitensis among goats, it was even lower. It's only 0.9%, but it was high among farms, which is about 7.1%. In a case control study, we studied the farming system, and we found that mainly extensive farms were positively associated and have an increased odds of exposure to the bacteria. And farmers who reported encountering wild animals also, we found that it increases the odds of farm to be seropositive. For Melio came to light because of Lubuk U incident. Lubuk U is where a boy drowned, and then there was the volunteers who actually went to search party for the boy. Following that, about 8 people died from the volunteer team, and they were co-infected with Melio and leptospirosis. So that brought about the interest for melioidosis. So we did a study on Melio in animals using the serosurveillance data, and we found that based on the serosurveillance, we found that for the farms at least, the bush clearing activities increase the risk of exposure to Burkholderia. This is not surprising because they are present in the soil and they can be dispersed during all these land clearing activities. And then actually you can do something about it. You can treat the farm soil with lime because it appears that if you do that, your farm will be protective. And certainly there's correlation between rainfall and the increasing incidence or prevalence of melioidosis in animals. So I have so far talked about pathogens and diseases that is rather obvious because they have some kind of like defined clinical manifestation. So at some point, I think to a certain degree, those can be easier to appreciate because they are tangible. So there is a growing global threat that is categorically insidious, causing what many can consider as slow motion, silent pandemic. This threat has no face and does not cause disease with defined characteristic. Labeled as a poster child for one health issue and the epitome of a complex problem is the antimicrobial resistant AMR. Developing resistance, immunity, or tolerance to something that may be harmful to one's body is a mechanism granted by God to give living things a chance of survival. This is how Allah is being kind to us, or God is being kind to us. Resistance to antibiotics has been discovered almost immediately as antibiotics are marketed, in some cases even before. So resistance is a natural process. Okay, even in pristine environment, those ancient bacteria, they show to a certain degree some level of resistance to newly developed antibiotics. However, our thoughtless use of antibiotics has sped the process up significantly to where we are today. Within the next few decades, if we just continue to be like how we are and remain status quo and continue to squander our antibiotics, we will be living in a post-pandemic era. My interest in antibiotics resistance organism began in 2007 when our local farmers faces issues to export chicken to Singapore because Singapore said that they want only VRE-free chickens. At the time, there was several huge outbreaks of hospital-based infection of vancomycin-resistant enterococcus, and certain studies done in Western countries, especially the Europe, suggest that chickens and livestock is the source of the VRE. So at the time, we knew very little what's going on with VRE in our food animals. I was called to a joint discussion by the DBS where we decided that we want to collaborate so that we can get some data, some information, so that we can answer some questions by the Singaporean authority. So we designed a study by which we sampled the pig workers and chicken farm workers alongside the animals in the farm. We hope to improve our understanding on the extent of the problem in the local food animals and provide some information into the correlation between VRE isolates in livestock and in humans. So what we found is consistent with some other work is that despite sampling both animals and humans from the very same environment, the genotype of VRE tends to remain mostly in its own niche. If you notice here, like human, they tend to stay within the human niche clade, and the pigs tend to stand in the pigs. And same here, the animal tend to remain in their own clade, except for this one chicken, which happened to be grouped together with the human. So we think that the humans actually gave the chicken the string. It's not the other way around. So in conclusion, although one isolate from chicken turned out to be the clone of the human isolate, we think that that happened because of back transmission from humans to the chicken. So we published our study in 2012 and 13. At the time, although there was much interest about MRSA, about VRE, and all that, there was less discussion about MR being the global health threat. So fast forward to 2016, AMR was declared as a major global health threat by the United Nations high-level meeting. Health topics are very atypical, and in the United Nations meeting agenda, this signals that the issue is actually quite enormous, and it needs urgent attention, and it requires everybody to stop doing whatever they're doing and start rethinking about using antibiotics. This, of course, is easier said than done. A number of us in the faculty were involved in shaping and developing the National Action Plan for AMR. So this action plan was actually formulated through cross-sectoral and multi-agency type of approach, and we got everybody involved in it. At present, it is agreed that there are multiple drivers in the ecology of AMR, two of which are really critical, is the overuse and misuse of antibiotics for human health reasons and for animal health and production. However, at the beginning, when we're just starting the AMR conversation, the use of antibiotics in intensive food animal production was very heavily discussed. There's a lot and there's significant misunderstanding amongst the non-animal health sectors about the motivation of such use. Like medical doctors, they couldn't understand, why are you giving the cattle or the chicken antibiotics? They don't really understand that. So it is our job to educate why we use antibiotics, because sometimes it is necessary. It's one of the tools that we use as vets to make sure that our animals' welfare and health are taken care of. So worldwide even, the use of antibiotics in food animals is supposed to be heavily liable for the development of resistant pathogens or resistant genes and then negatively affecting the human health. So we decided to do something fun because everybody's talking about, let's go eat ayam kampung, don't eat the commercial chicken. So, and they said that, it's organic, so it's safe for us. So it indirectly drives the popularity of organic food and food that are raised in such environment. So ayam kampung eggs, they have always been popular, but the niche market actually expanded because people were going for that. I would really argue that the definition of organic is very loose in this part of the world, but I think it's better if we explore the belief through some proper investigation. So we did a simple study. We sampled the ayam kampung, and we looked for Salmonella species, which is one of the most important foodborne pathogens worldwide. So indeed, what we found, I'm sure the ayam kampung people will be very happy, that the Salmonella was isolated remarkably at a much lower level, and the level of resistance to various antibiotics are extremely lower than what we will find in the commercial chicken. A rather huge gap that I detected through the various roles I played while participating in AMR seminars and meetings worldwide is the need to have more emphasis on the AMR impact on animal health and industry. So there's a lack of, I think, when it comes to scoping of AMR issues, with a lot of attention being placed as saying that animals are reservoir of all these diseases and resistance to human. In the landscape of AMR studies, most publications focus on AMR in healthy livestock, probably because those will end up in the human food chain. And we don't really have information regarding the resistance in pathogens causing animal disease. So what we did was that we decided maybe it is necessary to provide some information about how important the resistance is to our clinical isolates. So we investigated 3 years worth of clinical data and discovered a terrifying scenario for veterinary professionals. So just very quickly, the dark blue is actually the level of resistance. So anything beyond 50% is considered high. So look at how many antibiotics are considered high. Anything beyond 70% is considered very high. So for most of the antibiotics that is commonly being used, most are almost no longer effective to treat our animals. The same with MDR, for example, for major pathogen like E. coli and stuff, over 70% are actually MDR, multiple drug resistant. And we see the same for, just now, we see the same pattern for our pet animals. And here the pink, if you see the pink right here, these are all a level of resistance for the various commonly used antibiotics. And this is the level of MDR, the one in orange. So that's bad news, actually bad news for veterinary professionals. And I can't tell you how many times as a consultant for bacteriology, we found bacteria that are completely resistant to everything that we tested. So it's very sad and very tragic for the owner of the animal because you pretty much cannot do anything. We also did similar study in aquaculture because aquaculture is quite interesting because it's a setting by which it receives multiple sources of contaminants from terrestrial sources, from farms, from the hospitals, from everything. So we wanted to see what is the level of resistance for the E. coli, which is an indicator pathogen. So it's not too bad. I mean, for our broiler animals and pigs and layer chicken, the resistance is actually remarkably almost 3 times higher than the one that we see in fish, although it's still quite high, especially for erythromycin, but it's not too bad compared to other livestock. We also, from that study also, we found that if the farmer were to use manure, like fresh manure, and use that to fertilize the pond, then there's an increasing risk of the bacteria to be multi-drug resistant. So I've spoken about all the complex issues. I've spoken about all the complicated matters, so maybe I should talk about the potential way by which we can manage those complicated and complex issues. So I'm going to talk about One Health. As you probably know, humans and animals, and in this case I'm going to talk about animals because we are humans, we don't talk about ourselves. Animals carry diverse varieties of microorganisms. Actually, humans carry the same amount of microbes, but with the animals that have probably co-evolved with them for centuries. Most of the microbes are harmless. You can go on and on and on looking for them. You'll find something new, but basically it doesn't mean that if it's there, it's going to be harmful. Therefore, uncovering novel microbes from animals, especially wild animals, is really not that surprising, as we have only been introduced to only a fraction of all possible microbes. What is worrying, I think, is the increasing frequency of novel pathogens to jump species at the wild animal livestock human interface. and there are circumstances by which a lot of us still do not understand. I mean, we have a little bit more understanding, but still we do not know a whole lot. Fortunately, both human and animal health sectors recognizes the complexity of the issue and decided to do something about it. So the discussion on emerging zoonosis complexity escalated into One Health, One Medicine movement. In 2004, the Wildlife Conservation Society brings together human, animal health experts to discuss the exchange of diseases between human, domestic animals, and wild animals. So the symposium establishes 12 priorities called the Manhattan Principles and address threats to human and other and animal health in a movement called One Health, One World. So that's the timeline of major events, key events that makes One Health what it is right now. These are the milestones. It's not a new concept. I think many of you know that. And throughout the years, it had been proposed and reasserted by various, making it something that is what it is right now. All the agencies are supporting it and asking us to use the One Health concept. By definition, One Health have evolved with various degrees of plasticity from being very narrow to being too broad. At the heart of One Health is the understanding that human, animal, and the environment are highly interconnected, and one cannot invest on a single domain while ignoring the other. So that's the definition. That's the most recent definition by the quadripartite, which includes the United Nations Environmental Program. This is the most current scheme and framework of One Health that had recently been introduced in 2022. Southeast Asia and South Asia is an emerging hotspot for zoonosis and AMR consumption and also for zoonosis. Because of many things, some of it is because of the livestock industrialization in response to population meat demand, because also we have really high number of intensive farming production system, and at the same time we have abundance of extensive farming system, which makes it almost impossible to implement proper biosecurity in that type of framework. So because of the framing of such environment, it's quite natural for the animals to become a continuous supply of susceptible animals should there ever be an event where there is pathogen spillover. There is undisputable evidence that implicates natural and anthropogenic induced ecosystem changes driven by culture, economy, and politics. This has shifted the balance, spread, and proliferation of disease vectors, acquisition and dissemination of antibiotic resistance, and increased chance of novel pathogen spillover. So Flo Wright publishes this paper in, I think it was Nature, and she presented the layers of drivers by which the pathogen would have to go through before it spill over to humans. The regional One Health network, of which Malaysia One Health University Network is part of, started under the Emerging Pandemic Threat Program in 2008. However, it was not until the end of 2012 when real work began in Malaysia. I was asked to become the coordinator of the network, of which I remain to this very day. So I wanted to focus on AMR a little bit, just because AMR is such a big issue and has been discussed again and again in various platforms. In the earlier days of the Strategic Action Plan, I was invited to give many talks and moderate forums at the national and international platform. I found that because of the anthropocentric, the human-centric framing of the AMR threat, my approach, tone, and also what I say, it varies with the audience that is listening. if they are medical doctors, I would say that, I have to give justification in terms of why we use antibiotics and why sometimes it is completely necessary. While I'm in the audience, if the audience are farmers, I would say that, hey, you guys are using too much antibiotics, stop it already. So what is interesting to me is that, in my mind, because of the framing of the human focus of the whole AMR issue, sometimes it creates defense mechanism, especially by the animal health sector, and the unnecessary question about, really, what kind of evidence do they have to say that the problem in humans are actually caused by the animals. That kind of reaction at the beginning. I think to a large degree, many people have resorted that kind of issue, but I still get those questions whenever, even till last year, I still get those kind of questions at an international forum for AMR in terms of quantification of how much AMR in human health actually is contributed by animal use of antibiotics. These are difficult questions, you can't answer that. So I wanted to ask, how long do I have still? Second? Hampir. Okay. Sorry. A single word that weighs more heavily than any other in the conversation that I have about disease prevention and preservation of antibiotics is behavior, right? So behavior, it's something that is very difficult to change. In an international panel discussion for the economists on AMR, I was tweeted as saying that using antibiotics to raise food animals has been ingrained for decades in the culture and habits of animal productions, which drives the behavior that needs to be rethinked and reshaped to change the upward trajectory of AMR worldwide. So I don't know too much about anthropology or sociology, but I have come to appreciate, and I'm very convinced that it is completely necessary to incorporate progressively this branch of science into One Health equation to supply for sustainable disease prevention and efforts. I think the social scientists will be very happy that I'm saying this, especially my husband. So One Health approach is not complete without integrating the social science perspective, right? Husband, right? That connects the many dots in the complex interconnectedness of issues such as emerging zoonoses and AMR. How human behaves or choose to behave determine disease occurrence, outbreak, and its trajectories. Behavioral intervention is a very non-specific solution that targets an overall reduction in risk and behavior that enable pathogen transmission or reduce antibiotic usefulness. So incorporating the social sciences into One Health approach helps to address topics of human-animal behavior or environmental conflict in a novel way, ensuring sustainable prevention of emerging diseases at the grassroots. So we did a very short and small study by which my husband is one of the co-PI for this, and trying to understand how farmers view and how they make decisions in a more practical way. And we found that it's completely necessary to actually include that to make sure that we can tailor some of the decision making and also tailor the way that we do things so that they are able to adapt and adopt the new policy or regulations sustained by the government. So that has been a very long journey for me, and the experiences that I have gone through with you are 20 years worth of experience. So I think, as a final word, I think Malaysia, we are unique because we are located at the center of emerging markets, and our population will continue to increase in coming years. Increasing wealth will continue to change human lifestyle. The agriculture sectors need to expand significantly to ensure adequate protein and food for the growing population. Various measures have been taken to increase animal production, such as expanding agriculture land and diversifying animal production system. Unfortunately, sometimes the implementation are often not balanced by strengthening environmental and health regulations. Regulations could be there, but because of perhaps lack of human resources and power, perhaps it is a little bit more challenging to implement them. On its cover in 2017, Times Magazine declared that the world is not ready for the next pandemic. That was 2017. And in 2020, they are proven to be absolutely right. In a blink of an eye, our world was turned upside down and inside out by SARS-CoV-2. At the time that this inaugural, I'm talking right here, COVID-19 is weaker, but is very much alive. It will take years to estimate the devastation from the COVID-19, the aftermath that is still being felt and will continue to be felt in coming years. As you can see, the prices of materials are sky high right now, and a lot of people are in a lot of difficulties. So there's a lot of talks and discussion about predicting the next or the future pandemic, but the nature of the pandemic is that it's hard to predict. But I believe we should attempt to change what we could do given what had happened. And we need to learn from our past experience so that we can alter the course of history rather than merely reflect it in the aftermath. Steve Jobs said that you cannot connect dots looking forward, but you can connect dots looking backward. We cannot predict the future, but we can learn critical lessons from studying the past. The question is, will we spend enough time looking back at this pandemic to connect the dots and see where we have gone wrong? If we find them, would we have enough energy to support and to fix them? Thomas Sowell said, there is no solutions. There's only trade-offs. Perfect solution is never always possible, especially when it comes to something as complex as One Health issues, as complex as zoonosis, as complex as AMR, as complex as the next pandemic. So what trade-offs are we willing to live with? And who will have to live with most of the trade-offs? Unfortunately, I do not have the answer for any of these questions. On that note, I would like to acknowledge a whole lot of people right here. I'm not going to say them out. You know who you are, and also acknowledge you in my books. If I forgot to acknowledge any of you, please know that directly or indirectly, you have contributed to a whole lot that I have achieved. I can never do any of what I have done without all of you. Again, I am very grateful to my late mother, Allah Yarhamah Hajah Kalsum Muhammad, my father, Haji Hassan Ali, my siblings, my husband, Abdul Latif. That's an accident, yeah, we don't design that. So he converted first and then he chose that name, not because he wants to marry me. And my children, they are my core supporters. My family-in-law, I don't know whether mom is listening in. Liz and Dave, thank you for embracing me as part of the family. There is no me without all of you. Thank you all.
Okey. Alhamdulillah. Terima kasih kita ucapkan kepada yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan. Saya kira tidak keterlaluan kalau saya jemput Prof Latiffah sekali lagi untuk berdiri sekejap dan mohon memandang kepada penonton. Boleh kita beri tepukan yang gemuruh kepada Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan. So alhamdulillah, sememangnya banyak yang boleh kita pelajari daripada apa yang telah dikongsikan dalam syarahan inaugural beliau. Sememangnya apa yang telah diusahakan selama ini sangat-sangat penting, memberikan manfaat. Dan satu yang saya ingin petik adalah keutamaan untuk kita meneruskan usaha translational research, kerjasama merentas disiplin antara penyelidik pelbagai bidang. Jadi that's why I was about to mention that just now bila you tanya you were about to refer to anthropologists or sociologists kan, so I think you have one in the house, so boleh banyak buat perbincangan dengan Profesor Dr. Abdul Latif Abdullah Kraus. Dan sesungguhnya kita nampak apa yang telah dikongsikan menunjukkan betapa pentingnya kita membuat penyelidikan secara bersama. Dan kerja-kerja penyelidikan transnasional ni bukan saja tentang penerbitan dalam jurnal-jurnal terkemuka ataupun menghasilkan penyelidikan yang bermutu tinggi, tetapi juga untuk mencari penyelesaian dan membantu untuk memastikan yang kehidupan kita ini akan sentiasa terjaga. Dan we cannot avoid that we will always coexist, in the ecosystem. And so kita kena pastikan yang kita dapat menjaga kesejahteraan semua. Okey, so sekali lagi saya ucapkan tahniah kepada Prof Latiffah Hassan. Tahniah juga kepada semua individu yang telah membantu beliau selama ini. Kita harapkan selepas ini akan ada banyak lagi projek-projek yang akan dihasilkan oleh Prof Latiffah yang akan memberikan manfaat kepada pelajar, kepada rakan-rakan dan juga kepada masyarakat secara umumnya. Jadi saya sekali lagi mengucapkan banyak terima kasih kepada Fakulti Perubatan Veterinar yang menjemput saya untuk memperkongsikan Majlis Syarahan Inaugural Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan pada pagi ini. Sekali lagi semoga kita akan terus bersama-sama menyumbang kepada pembangunan ilmu dan juga menyumbang kepada kesejahteraan masyarakat. Sekian, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Saya kembalikan kepada pengurusi program. Terima kasih.
Majlis merakamkan ucapan ribuan terima kasih kepada Yang Berbahagia Profesor Dr. Ismi Arif bin Ismail, Timbalan Naib Chancellor Akademik dan Antarabangsa, di atas kesudian mempengerusikan Majlis Syarahan Inaugural itu tadi. Majlis juga ingin merakamkan ucapan terima kasih kepada Yang Berbahagia Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan di atas penyampaian syarahan beliau yang syarat dengan pengalaman, ilmiah dan sangat bermanfaat.
Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, seterusnya dijemput sama-sama untuk menonton satu tayangan video khas daripada Prof Latiffah Hassan. Dipersilakan.
Animals are adorable, aren't they? And it's so great when they're so healthy. Hi, I'm Prof Latiffah, and I'm a veterinary public health epidemiologist. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it just means that I understand the interconnection between animal health and human health. Animals play a key role in human wellness and environmental protection. They do a lot for us. They provide us love and comfort, important nutrition, safety and security. They balance the ecosystem as many species are vital for reforestation. They are great helpers for seed pollination and pest control. So it is important to keep our animals and environment healthy because their health is very much interconnected with ours. Let me put that in context. In 1998, I was a graduate student in the United States. I was in San Diego, about ready to present a paper at a conference. I just so happened to glance at the TV and saw Malaysia on the news flash. The TV was muted, So all I saw was someone wearing complete personal protective equipment, entering a pig farm, and then images of sick-looking pigs. Whenever your country is broadcast on a major international news outlet, you know it is never a good thing. So that was when I learned about this new mysterious disease causing pigs and humans that are in contact with those pigs to become severely ill. The disease was thereafter named Nipah disease, caused by a newly emerging virus from bats. Now, bats usually roost in isolated areas away from people, but according to the later scientific publications, a number of key environmental events had happened before the outbreak that resulted in the bats to lose important source of their diet, forcing them to migrate away from the forest, their natural habitat, to seek for food. It so happened that they chose a commercial pig farming area because they were attracted to the many fruit trees planted around the farm. And it was coincidental that the trees were located close to where the pigs were enclosed. The pigs later became very sick from eating virus-contaminated fruits left over from bats' feeding activities. And because the virus can naturally be transmitted between animals and humans, individuals attending to those pigs later became sick too. At the local level, the Nipah incident was the turning point for understanding about the interconnectivity between human, animal, and their shared environment. Because of the complexity of how emerging infectious diseases such as Nipah arises, it is clear that not one single agency or organization can manage the disease by itself. Nipah disease was controlled through collaboration with multiple agencies in Malaysia from various disciplines, human, animal, and environmental sectors working together locally and nationally. This approach recently has been rebranded and re-emphasized and is now called One Health. You see, humans and animals share about 150 disease-causing agents and infections that can be transmitted naturally between the two. These are called zoonoses. The disease-causing agents can be bacteria, virus, or parasites. Yeah, keep going. The past 2 decades has seen a rise in emerging or new diseases in humans, and scientists agree that of these, over 70% are zoonotic and arise because of complex interaction between humans, animals, and the shared environment. So it is absolutely important to ensure that our animals, pet, food animals, wildlife, and the environment by which we all share are healthy to reduce the chance of disease transmission. One Health Day has been celebrated every November since 2016 to remind us about the importance of partnership and collaboration in tackling complex problems that impact us all, animals, humans, and the environment. All of us play critical, vital role regardless of our position in the society. Complex problems cannot be solved by a single individual, institution, or agency. So basically, it means that it cannot have a single solution. The solution has to come from everyone involved at multiple levels, which will result in a more holistic solution. There are other more recent examples of the Nipah disease I mentioned earlier: zoonotic malaria, rabies, avian flu, and the most recent COVID-19 pandemic serve to remind us that we cannot and must not work alone. Happy One Health Day!
Para hadirin sekalian, kita semua sangat bertuah pada hari ini jika di awal majlis kita telah melihat putera kepada Yang Bahagia Profesor Dr. Latiffah Hassan membuat kemunculan. Di akhir majlis ini kita akan diserikan dengan sebuah persembahan istimewa yang akan dipersembahkan oleh puteri beliau. I guess the talent and the confidence runs in the family. Tanpa melengahkan masa, dengan ini majlis menjemput adik Nadia Jasmine untuk naik ke pentas. Majlis mempersilakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hello everybody. My name is Nadia Jasmine. Today I'm going to read a poem called Cry of Wolves by Sheila Bowman. Rulers of the night, the wilderness is your home. Man in his ignorance won't leave you alone. Strong together you'll hunt for survival. Man and his gun, your only rival. Mistress of the moon, shadows dancing on northern skies. I hear your torment and mournful cries. Running, hunting, surviving, dying. From frozen mountain tops, I hear your crying. Great warriors of the night, I wish you strength and stamina, courage in your plight. You are the heart of the wilderness, cool air and mountain snow. You are part of this land, but man is your foe. So once again the dark night becomes black, and howling is heard as wolves gather and pack. With spirit and fight, stamina and charm, let no man destroy you, you mean them no harm. Brave warriors of the night, in the wilderness be, wise and cunning hunters forever be free. Let your howling join the earth. May you hunt with no fear. Let the mountains echo out the howl of wolves that fills the mountain air. Okay. Thank you everyone for listening to my poem called The Cry of Wolves. So now I'm going to read another poem called The Lonely Lion by Amos Russell Wells. The lion was lonely, said he, there is only one way of driving this gloom from me. I must enter into society. So he asked the beast in a manner quite hearty to come to his cave for a little party. On the appointed day, in a frightened way, a parrot flew over his head to say that the beast would be happy the lion to greet, but they very much feared he was out of meat. Alas! The lion cried with a groan, and must I then live forever alone?
Alright. Well done, Nadia. Majlis mengucapkan terima kasih kepada adik Nadia Jasmine di atas persembahan yang cukup menarik itu tadi.
Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan yang dihormati sekalian, dengan berakhirnya persembahan itu tadi, maka tamatlah sudah majlis kita pada pagi ini. Sebelum majlis bersurai, majlis sekali lagi menjemput barisan div kehormat dan seluruh tetamu yang hadir di Dewan ini untuk sama-sama kita mengabadikan kenangan pada pagi ini dengan sesi fotografi. Saya mohon jurugambar untuk membantu bagi sesi fotografi.